Cop smashed an 8-year-old black girl's head with a baton, then finds out who her mother is. What if the most ordinary day of your life suddenly became the memory you'd spend years trying to understand? Picture a quiet Saturday afternoon in Millstone, a town small enough that folks still wave from their porches and children ride their bikes in lazy circles down the street. The sun was soft that day, glinting off wind chimes and laundry lines, while 8-year-old Jasmine Carter skipped along the sidewalk with her favorite doll pressed to her chest. She was humming the jingle of the ice cream truck she thought she'd heard, her braids bouncing, her world still innocent and unshaken. Inside the diner just a block away, her mother Angela was finishing her shift, wiping down the counter like she had 100 times before. Neither of them knew that within the hour, their lives and the town itself would never be the same again. Angela Carter had worked at Millstone Diner for almost 12 years. It wasn't glamorous work, but she wore it with quiet pride. She was 38, with laugh lines that showed she'd known both joy and hardship. Her co-workers liked to tease that no one could balance 3 plates of pancakes, 2 cups of coffee, and still find time to ask about your mother's health the way Angela could. To her, the diner wasn't just a job, it was part of the rhythm of survival. Every tip dropped into the jar was a step toward Jasmine's school supplies, toward rent, toward the dream that her daughter's life would be smoother than her own. Jasmine, just 8, was Angela's light. The girl had her father's wide brown eyes and a smile that turned strangers into friends. Angela's husband, Marcus, had been gone for 3 years now, a construction accident that left a silence in their small house too deep to fill. But Marcus's spirit lingered in the lessons he'd left behind. "Stand tall, Ange," he used to say. "Even when life wants to bend you down, you show Jasmine what strength looks like." Angela carried that mantra like a torch. She repeated it at bedtime when Jasmine had nightmares or when bills piled up on the kitchen table. And Jasmine, tender-hearted as she was, seemed to soak it in. On this Saturday, Angela had promised Jasmine ice cream if she waited just a little longer until her shift ended. It was the sort of small promise that meant the world to a child. Jasmine had perched on a stool by the front window, swinging her legs, humming to herself as she held her doll, a ragged little thing named Clara. Customers smiled as they passed, some dropping quarters into Jasmine's palm with a wink. "For your ice cream fund," they said. She beamed at each of them, clutching the coins like treasure. Millstone was the kind of town where people thought they knew each other, but beneath the surface, tensions always hummed. The police department, though small, had grown wary of the rising whispers about profiling and heavy-handed patrols. Just 2 weeks earlier, there'd been an incident at the park. A teenager accused of loitering, handcuffed too roughly, his cries echoing until neighbors intervened. Folks muttered about it in the diner, lowering their voices, glancing toward the door, as if afraid of being overheard. Angela kept her opinions close, but inside she worried. She wanted Jasmine to inherit a world where kindness weighed more than suspicion, where little girls could skip toward an ice cream truck without fear. That afternoon, the hum of conversation in the diner was interrupted by the crackle of a police radio outside. Angela glanced through the window and saw 2 squad cars roll slowly down Main Street. The officers inside seemed tense, scanning sidewalks as though danger might spring from the shade of the maples. Word spread quickly. A call had come in about a burglary 2 blocks away. Children playing in the area were told to stay put, while officers secured the perimeter. Angela tried to keep her focus on the counter, but her eyes kept darting back to Jasmine. She knew her daughter, restless, curious, full of a child's boundless energy. Sure enough, when Jasmine heard the distant music of the ice cream truck, its tinny melody weaving through the summer air, her small body stiffened with excitement. "Mama, can I go, please?" she whispered, hopping off the stool. Angela started to shake her head, but then saw the eager hope in her daughter's eyes. "Stay on the sidewalk, baby. Straight there and back," she said, her voice both stern and gentle. Jasmine nodded solemnly and clutched Clara tight as she skipped out the door. The world outside seemed ordinary enough. Neighbors sat on porches, fanning themselves. A lawnmower droned down the block. But the police presence gave everything a different edge. Officers were moving briskly, calling into radios, their eyes sharper than usual. To them, every movement was something to interpret, every shadow a potential threat. And in the middle of it all, a little girl with braids, carrying a doll, ran toward a song only she could hear. Angela's heart tightened as she watched from the diner doorway. She wanted to trust that nothing could happen in broad daylight. Not here, not to her baby. But then she noticed one officer stiffen, his hand tightening on his baton. Jasmine had dropped a quarter, and as she bent quickly to pick it up, the motion looked, at least to eyes already primed for suspicion, like a sudden crouch. The officer shouted something Angela couldn't hear, and before she could react, he surged forward. It happened in a blur. Jasmine straightened just as the baton came down, striking the side of her head. The sound was sickening, sharp against the summer air. Her small body crumpled, Clara tumbling from her arms. A scream tore from Angela's throat before she even knew she'd moved. She ran, shoving past startled neighbors, dropping her apron in the street. "Jasmine!" she cried, falling to her knees beside her daughter. Blood pooled too quickly from a gash along Jasmine's temple. The girl's eyes fluttered, unfocused, and then rolled back. Angela pressed trembling hands to the wound, her voice cracking. "Stay with me, baby, stay with Mama." The officer stumbled back, his face blanching as he realized what he'd done. But others quickly closed ranks, radios squawking, their words a blur of accident and procedure. Sirens wailed as an ambulance was called, but for Angela, time had already fractured. She clutched Jasmine's tiny body, rocking back and forth, whispering prayers she hadn't spoken in years. Neighbors gathered, some shouting, some recording with their phones. The air filled with confusion, outrage, and fear. But Angela heard none of it clearly. All she could hear was the faint, shallow breaths of her daughter and the pounding of her own heart. When the paramedics arrived, they lifted Jasmine gently onto a stretcher. Angela tried to climb in after her, but an officer stepped in her way, holding up a hand. "Ma'am, you need to stay back." "Well, she's my child." Angela's voice cracked like thunder. "You don't tell me to stay back." "That's my baby." A paramedic, kinder than the officer, touched her arm. "She can come," he said firmly, and Angela scrambled into the ambulance, never letting go of Clara the doll, now streaked with blood. The doors slammed shut, and for a moment the world outside disappeared. Inside, the siren wailed as paramedics worked swiftly, pressing gauze, checking vitals. Angela sat frozen, gripping Jasmine's hand with one and the doll with the other. Her lips moved silently, repeating Marcus's words like a lifeline. "Stand tall, Ange. Show her what strength looks like." But all Angela could feel was the weight of fear pressing down, threatening to shatter her. She kissed her daughter's forehead, her tears falling into Jasmine's braids, and whispered a promise. "Mama's right here. I won't let them take you from me." And outside, Millstone was already stirring. Phones buzzed, voices rose, and a community that had long tried to look away from its cracks was about to be forced to see them. The emergency room at St. Mary's Hospital was a blur of fluorescent light and rushing footsteps. Angela sat rigidly in the corner of the waiting area, Clara the doll pressed against her chest as if it were her daughter's heartbeat she was clinging to. Hours seemed to crawl by with no word, every tick of the clock stretching her fear thinner until it became unbearable. Around her, voices murmured, neighbors who had followed from Main Street, reporters who had caught wind, and strangers whose eyes softened when they saw the blood still staining Angela's blouse. Finally, a doctor approached, his face lined with exhaustion but not unkind. "Miss Carter?" Angela's knees almost gave out as she stood. "Your daughter is stable for now. The impact caused a concussion and a laceration that required stitches. We'll keep her under observation for swelling, but she's a fighter." The words, "stable for now," gave Angela something to breathe with. She covered her face with both hands, sobbing into her palms before looking up at the doctor. "Can I see her?" "Of course. Just for a few minutes." Inside the room, Jasmine looked impossibly small against the white sheets, her braids splayed out like a crown. Angela sat by her side, brushing stray curls from her daughter's forehead. "Mama's here," she whispered. Jasmine stirred faintly, eyes flickering, but did not fully wake. Angela kissed her daughter's hand and sat in silence. The steady beeping of the monitor, both a comfort and a cruel reminder of how close she had come to losing everything. She thought of Marcus again, and how he would have stormed heaven and earth to protect their little girl. She whispered to him as if he might be listening, "I'll carry it now, Marcus, for both of us." But outside that hospital room, the world was already spinning into uproar. By evening, videos of the incident were circulating. Online, showing the officer's baton striking Jasmine, the child collapsing, and Angela's scream piercing the air. The town of Millstone, used to quiet disputes and hushed murmurs, suddenly found itself the center of state headlines. The police department's first statement called it an unfortunate misunderstanding during a high-alert operation. That language only fanned the flames. To Angela, it was not a misunderstanding. It was her baby's blood on a sidewalk, and her faith in safety shattered. The next morning, Angela walked into the station, Clara tucked under her arm because Jasmine had whimpered for it in her sleep. She demanded to speak to someone in charge. The receptionist, stiff and polite, said, "The chief is unavailable at the moment, ma'am. You'll need to file a formal report." Angela leaned forward, her voice low but unshakable. "My daughter is 8 years old." Your officer split her head open with a baton. "Her report isn't going to cover this." The receptionist shifted uncomfortably, then disappeared into a back office. Minutes later, a sergeant appeared, face tight with rehearsed neutrality. "Miss Carter, I understand your anger. There will be an internal review. We take these things seriously." Angela met his eyes, her voice trembling but firm. "Do you? Because if she were your little girl, would a review be enough?" He flinched just slightly, and Angela saw it, a crack in the armor. But it wasn't enough. She turned and walked out, the whispers of officers behind her following like shadows. News vans lined Main Street that afternoon, reporters swarming locals for sound bites. Some defended the officers, citing stress and danger. Others shook their heads, saying they'd warned this would happen sooner or later. Angela kept her head down as she returned to the diner for her shift, though customers stopped her every few minutes with sympathy or outrage. One slid an envelope across the counter quietly. It held $50 and a note for Jasmine. "We're praying for you." That night, Angela sat at the kitchen table long after Jasmine had fallen asleep. Bills, medical forms, and pamphlets on patient rights lay scattered in front of her. She felt a storm rising inside, but fear kept it tangled. She was one woman, a waitress with no wealth or power. What could she really do against a badge, against a system that closed its doors to her? The knock at her door startled her. When she opened it, she found a man she hadn't seen in years, Officer Daniel Riley. He looked older than she remembered, his once boyish face lined with guilt. He held his cap in both hands, twisting it nervously. "Angela," he began softly, I don't expect forgiveness, but I couldn't stay quiet." Angela's eyes narrowed. "You were there," he nodded. "I wasn't the one who swung, but I was part of the unit. And when I saw your name on the report, I remembered." "Remembered what?" Angela asked sharply. Daniel swallowed. "Marcus, your husband. He saved my life once. There was a fire in a construction site downtown. I was off duty, just happened to be nearby. I would have been trapped if he hadn't pulled me out. I owed him everything. And now," his voice cracked, "now this." Angela felt the weight of his words sink into her chest. A cruel twist of fate. Marcus had given life, and now the same badge his memory had touched had nearly taken it from their daughter. Daniel's eyes filled with tears he didn't wipe away. "I can't undo what happened, but I can testify. I saw the whole thing. The command to advance was reckless, and the strike was unjustified. If this goes to hearing, I'll speak." For the first time in days, Angela felt something shift inside her. It wasn't hope yet, but it was a sliver of possibility. She studied Daniel, his shame written in every line of his posture. "You should have spoken yesterday," she said quietly. "I know," he admitted, voice breaking. "But I'm speaking now." Angela closed the door with no promise, no forgiveness. But inside, as she returned to Jasmine's bedside and held her daughter's hand, she whispered, "We're not alone in this fight, baby. Not anymore." And though Jasmine did not stir, Angela thought she felt her daughter's small fingers squeeze hers. As if agreeing, the following day, local newspapers carried Daniel's anonymous account. The headline read, "Witness contradicts police report in Millstone baton case." The story caught fire. The department scrambled to defend itself, but cracks were showing. Citizens began gathering nightly outside City Hall, candles flickering in the dark. Children holding signs that read, "Protect us. Don't harm us." Angela stood among them, Clara tucked under her arm, Jasmine's photo on a poster in her other hand. She didn't chant, didn't shout. She simply stood, quiet but unmovable, her presence a reminder of what had been lost and what must change. That night, she returned home to find another envelope slipped under her door. This time it wasn't money. It was a handwritten note. "We're with you, Angela. Don't give up. Millstone is watching." For the first time since the baton struck, Angela allowed herself to believe that maybe her voice could matter. Maybe Marcus's words, "Stand tall," weren't just for Jasmine. Maybe they were for her too, and somewhere in the stillness of her small kitchen, with Clara resting on the table and her daughter breathing steadily down the hall, Angela felt a flicker of something fragile but undeniable. Not victory, not yet, but resolve. The following week blurred into a haze of hospital visits and restless nights. Jasmine's condition was stable, but recovery was slow. Some mornings she would wake long enough to smile faintly at her mother, whispering "Clara," before drifting back into sleep. Other times she stirred only to wince from headaches, her small hands clutching the sheets. Angela sat by her side each day, rubbing circles on Jasmine's back, whispering stories about Marcus, about the things they'd do once she was home, making pancakes on Sunday, chasing fireflies in the yard. But deep down, fear coiled around her heart. What if Jasmine never fully healed? What if the blow left invisible scars they couldn't yet see? Outside the town boiled. Candlelight vigils grew larger each night. Local clergy and school teachers speaking of dignity, respect, and the duty to protect children. Reporters swarmed Angela every time she left the hospital. She declined interviews, unwilling to let her daughter's pain become spectacle. But whispers reached her nonetheless. The police department had launched an internal review, though few believed it would lead to accountability. Angela felt torn in two. Part of her wanted to rage, to demand justice with every breath. Another part wanted only to protect Jasmine, to shield her from the noise and anger outside. Late one evening, after tucking Jasmine in and stepping out into the quiet hospital corridor, Angela leaned against the wall, exhaustion heavy in her bones. She felt utterly alone. "Angela!" The voice startled her. Mrs. Thompson, her elderly neighbor from 2 doors down, stood there holding a thermos. She was a wiry woman with sharp eyes and a soft heart, the kind of person who always had a story ready to soothe a restless child. "I thought you might need some tea," Mrs. Thompson said, pressing the thermos into Angela's hands. "Chamomile. It saved me many a night when I thought the world was ending." Angela smiled faintly, tears prickling. "Thank you. I don't even know what to do anymore. It feels bigger than me, like I'm screaming into the wind." Mrs. Thompson nodded slowly. "I know that feeling. When my son came back from Vietnam, he was broken. The system didn't see him, didn't help him. I felt powerless. But then I remembered power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's steady. Sometimes it's a mother showing up every day, refusing to let her child be forgotten." Her words sank deep into Angela's weary spirit. Steadiness, showing up. Maybe that was where her strength lay. That night, at home, Angela dug through an old cedar chest at the foot of her bed. Inside were Marcus's belongings. She hadn't had the heart to sort through since his death: a pair of work gloves, his worn boots, and a Bible with its leather cover cracked from years of use. She opened it, inhaling the faint scent of smoke and sawdust that still clung to the pages. Tucked between Psalms and Proverbs was a folded letter in Marcus's handwriting. Angela's hands shook as she unfolded it. The letter had been written years before, perhaps after one of his long shifts. Its ink faded but legible. "If anything ever happens to me, promise me you'll raise Jasmine to know the world can be better. Promise you'll never let fear silence you. Justice isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about standing when others sit, speaking when others whisper. If you're reading this, it means I didn't get the years I hoped for. But you did, and you're stronger than you know." Tears blurred the words, but Angela read them again and again, her heart both breaking and strengthening. It felt like Marcus was sitting across from her, speaking directly into her despair. The next morning, Angela carried the letter in her purse, as though it were armor. When she arrived at the hospital, Jasmine was awake, her eyes dull but alert. "Mama," she whispered, "did I do something wrong?" Angela's heart shattered. "Oh, baby, no. You didn't do anything wrong. You were just getting ice cream." "But the man yelled," Jasmine murmured, her lip trembling. "He looked so mad." Angela kissed her daughter's forehead. "Sometimes people see wrong when there isn't any. But you listen to me, you did nothing wrong. And Mama's going to make sure they know it." That same afternoon, a civil rights advocate named Rachel Alvarez approached Angela at the hospital. Rachel was a woman in her 40s with calm eyes and a quiet fire in her voice. "Ms. Carter," she said gently, "I know you've been through hell. I'm not here to put you on a stage or turn this into a headline. I'm here because I've seen too many families walk away without justice. You don't have to do this alone." Angela hesitated. "I'm not a fighter. I don't know the law. I'm just—" "You're a mother," Rachel interrupted softly. "And that's more powerful than anything else. You don't need to know the law. You just need to tell the truth. We'll help you with the rest." Angela felt Marcus's letter heavy in her purse, almost as if it were urging her forward. She nodded. "All right. Tell me what to do." The next week brought new challenges. The police department attempted to restrict Angela's access to the inquiry, citing confidentiality. Rachel pushed back, filing a petition for transparency. Meanwhile, Angela endured whispered threats, anonymous calls telling her to drop it, neighbors who turned away instead of meeting her eyes. Doubt crept in at night, gnawing at her resolve. Was she making Jasmine's life harder by pressing forward? Was she painting a target on their backs? One night, sitting at the kitchen table with the Bible open and Marcus's letter spread before her, Angela whispered, "I don't know if I can do this." Her voice cracked. Jasmine, padding softly from her bedroom in her pajamas, climbed into her mother's lap. She pressed Clara the doll into Angela's hands. "Mama, you can borrow Clara if you're scared." "She helps me." Angela clutched the ragged doll, tears spilling freely now. "Thank you, baby." Mama's scared, but she's not giving up. Not ever. That was the turning point, not a dramatic speech or a televised moment, but a quiet exchange in the kitchen, a mother drawing strength from her child's faith in her. The next morning, Angela stood taller. She walked into the lawyer's office with Rachel, ready to prepare her testimony. She knew the road ahead would be long, that those in power would try to minimize, dismiss, or intimidate her. But she also knew this: Marcus's letter had called her to stand. Jasmine's innocence had demanded she speak, and the community, fragile but growing louder, was waiting for someone to lead. Angela didn't feel like a leader. She felt like a mother, with trembling hands and an aching heart. But maybe that was enough. Maybe it always had been. The hearing was held in Millstone's municipal building, a brick structure that usually handled zoning permits and budget disputes, not matters that would attract cameras and overflow crowds. But that morning, the square outside was packed with neighbors, clergy, and students, holding handmade signs. Justice for Jasmine. Protect our children. Accountability now. Angela arrived in a modest navy dress, her hair pulled back, Marcus's letter folded carefully in her purse. Jasmine, still too fragile to attend, stayed home with Mrs. Thompson. Angela kissed her daughter's forehead before leaving. "I'll be back soon, baby." "This is for you," Jasmine whispered. "Be strong, Mama," and squeezed Clara tight. Inside the chamber, the air was heavy. A panel of city officials sat at a long table, their microphones polished but cold. Across from them, the officers involved sat stiff in their uniforms, flanked by department lawyers. Daniel Riley was among them, his face drawn but resolute. Angela's pulse pounded as she took her seat beside Rachel Alvarez. The proceedings began with formality, statements from the board, procedural reminders. The police chief delivered a carefully worded defense. Our officers were responding to a credible threat in a volatile situation. The injury to Miss Carter was deeply regrettable, but occurred during lawful enforcement action. Angela clenched her fists. Lawful enforcement? Her child's skull had been split open, and they called it regrettable. Rage trembled inside her, but she remembered Marcus's letter. Stand tall. Speak when others whisper. When her turn came, Angela rose and walked slowly to the podium. The room hushed. She unfolded Marcus's letter, her hands steady now. My name is Angela Carter. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a politician. I'm a waitress. But more than that, I'm Jasmine's mother. She is 8 years old. She loves braids and pancakes and a ragged doll named Clara. She should be in school right now, not in a hospital bed because an officer mistook her for a threat. Her voice cracked. But she pressed on, reading from Marcus's words. My husband wrote this years ago. Justice isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about standing when others sit, speaking when others whisper. He isn't here to stand. So I am. The room was silent except for the scratch of pens. Angela looked directly at the panel. You tell me, was my daughter a danger? Was her doll a weapon? Or was she just a little black girl who wasn't seen as a child at all? A ripple moved through the audience. Some officials shifted uncomfortably. One of the lawyers objected to the emotional display, but the chairperson allowed Angela to continue. Then came Daniel's moment. He stood, his voice shaking but clear. I was there. I saw it all. Jasmine Carter did nothing wrong. The command to advance was reckless, and the baton strike was unjustified. Our report was altered to protect us. I can't live with that lie anymore. Gasps filled the room. The officers beside him stiffened, but Daniel's eyes never left Angela's. For a moment, she felt Marcus there watching. The hearing stretched for hours. Witnesses spoke, videos were replayed, lawyers sparred. By evening, the panel announced their findings. The officer who struck Jasmine would be suspended pending further disciplinary action. An independent review board would be established, with community representatives overseeing future cases. Mandatory training on de-escalation and bias would be implemented immediately. It wasn't everything Angela wanted. The officer wasn't fired on the spot. The apologies were muted, and the system itself still stood tall and rigid. But it was a beginning, a crack in the wall. Afterward, Angela stepped outside into the cool night air. The crowd erupted in cheers, not of victory but of recognition. Neighbors pressed flowers into her hands. Children hugged her legs. Someone started a chant, "For Jasmine!" But Angela raised her hand gently. This isn't about shouting, she said softly. It's about standing. Keep standing. Back at the hospital, she slipped into Jasmine's room, exhausted but lighter. Jasmine stirred, opening her eyes wide enough to see her mother. "Mama," Angela brushed her hair back, tears spilling. "Yes, baby." "I'm here." Jasmine's lips curved faintly. "Did you win?" Angela kissed her forehead. "We stood, baby. That's what matters." And people listened. Jasmine squeezed Clara and drifted back to sleep, and for the first time in weeks, Angela felt hope flicker steady inside her chest. Outside, change was slow, but real. The oversight board formed. Training sessions began. Some officers resisted, grumbling under their breath, but others, like Daniel, leaned into the work, determined to rebuild trust. Angela kept watch, showing up quietly at meetings. Ensuring promises became action. Her life at the diner resumed, though customers now treated her differently, not just as the woman who brought coffee refills, but as the mother who had stood tall when it mattered most. Tips grew larger, words of encouragement slipped across the counter. One evening after closing, Angela lingered at the window, watching the sun set over Millstone. She pulled Marcus's letter from her purse, smoothing its creases. She read it again. The words now etched into her very being, she whispered, "We did it, Marcus. Not everything, not yet, but we started." And in the quiet hum of the diner, with the scent of coffee still in the air, Angela felt her husband's spirit close, steady, proud, and unyielding. CTA, Natural Close of Part 5. If you've been moved by this journey, subscribe for more heartfelt stories. Autumn came slowly to Millstone. Leaves turned amber and gold, drifting across the sidewalks where children still played, though parents now watched more carefully. The diner's windows fogged with the warmth of coffee and stew as the nights grew crisp. For Angela, the world hadn't gone back to normal, nothing ever could, but life had found a new rhythm, one woven with resilience. Jasmine recovered gradually, her stitches healing, her headaches fading. There were nights she woke from nightmares, crying that the man is coming, but Angela would hold her close until her trembling stopped. They took walks around the block again, first short and cautious, then longer, Jasmine clutching Clara in one hand and her mother's fingers in the other. Every step forward felt like a victory. The town, too, shifted. The oversight board began meeting monthly, and though progress was slow, Angela saw genuine changes. Officers attended community workshops, listening, sometimes begrudgingly, sometimes with open hearts, to stories of fear and mistrust from residents. Daniel Riley resigned from the force quietly, choosing instead to volunteer at youth programs. He stopped by the diner one evening hesitant and handed Angela an envelope. "I'm donating to Jasmine's school fund," he said softly. "It's not penance. It's just a step." Angela studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Steps are how we move forward. Inside the envelope was a modest check, but what struck her more was the handwritten note. "I will never forget. And I will never stop trying to do better." Angela slipped the note into the same Bible that held Marcus's letter. Together, they became a testament to both the failures and the possibilities of human hearts. Life at the diner returned to its comforting routine. Angela carried plates and poured coffee, her hands steady again. But customers now looked at her with a quiet reverence. Some would squeeze her hand when they paid, whispering, "Thank you for standing." Tall. A group of teenagers presented her with a framed photo. The vigil outside City Hall, candles glowing, her silhouette holding Jasmine's picture. It hung on the diner wall, not as a boast, but as a reminder. One chilly evening, Angela closed the diner and walked home with Jasmine. The little girl skipped ahead, her braids swaying, Clara dangling by one arm. At a corner she turned back, grinning. "Mama, I think Clara's braver than me." Angela laughed softly. "Oh no, baby. Clara's just a doll. You're the brave one. You went through so much and you're still smiling." Jasmine tilted her head. "You're brave too." She reached into her backpack and pulled out Marcus's letter, carefully folded. "I borrowed this. I read it sometimes, even if I don't understand all the words. It makes me feel like Daddy's here." Angela stopped, her throat tightening. She knelt, cupping Jasmine's face. "Daddy is here. Every time we stand tall, every time we choose kindness instead of fear. He's right here with us." Together they walked on, the streetlights casting long shadows that seemed less heavy now. As winter approached, Angela hosted a small gathering at her home. Neighbors, Rachel Alvarez, Mrs. Thompson, even a few city officials who had supported the oversight reforms. Jasmine, shy but determined, stood on a chair and spoke. "Thank you for helping my mama. Thank you for helping me." The room grew misty-eyed, and Angela realized her daughter was learning strength not from lectures, but from living it. In the weeks that followed, Angela found quiet ways to continue her work. She attended board meetings, not to fight loudly, but to remind them of the human faces behind policies. She spoke at schools, sharing her story in measured words, encouraging children to trust their voices. She never sought recognition, only change, and slowly she saw it. Officers patrolling with less suspicion, more patience. Neighbors who once muttered in private now speaking openly. Trust didn't rebuild overnight, but the first stones were being laid. One night, after putting Jasmine to bed, Angela sat alone at the kitchen table. She unfolded Marcus's letter once more, tracing the familiar handwriting. She thought about how his words had carried her when she was close to giving up, how they had given shape to her courage. She placed the letter beside Jasmine's drawing from school, a picture of their family, Marcus smiling in the clouds above them. Angela whispered, "We're okay, Marcus. We're standing, just like you asked." The house was quiet except for the soft tick of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, peaceful. Weeks later, a reporter asked Angela if she felt justice had been done. She paused before answering. "Justice isn't a destination. It's a path. We're walking it. And we're not walking alone anymore." Her words spread, quoted in papers and repeated at meetings. But to Angela, they weren't a statement for headlines. They were the truth she had lived. The final snow of winter blanketed Millstone in silence. Angela stood at the diner window, watching flakes drift under the lamplight. Jasmine sat at a booth, drawing a picture of Clara in a superhero cape. When she held it up, Angela smiled. "She looks strong." "So do we," Jasmine replied, and for the first time in a long time, Angela believed it fully. That night, as they walked home through the snow, Angela slipped her hand into her daughter's. Jasmine clutched Clara in the other. The letter from Marcus rested in Angela's purse, its edges worn soft from being read so often. It was more than paper now. It was a bridge connecting the past to the present, reminding her that even in the darkest moments, dignity and love could light the way forward. Angela squeezed Jasmine's hand and whispered, "Let's go home." They walked on under the quiet sky, the snow muffling their steps, peace settling around them like a blessing. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. Every voice matters, and every story reminds us that hope and justice are still possible.